He's a former director, emergency service at Homeland Security, and is also president and CEO of Sherrill Entreprises and publishing company. Let's talk to Peter Sherrill. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Good to have you on the program again. And I remember the last time we spoke, I wanted to know, how on earth can a black man be a Republican in the United States? A lot has happened since that conversation. And I just wonder your thoughts, as someone who understands the Republican Party and as an American, to see Capitol Hill besieged.
Thanks, Peter, for having me on. As you know, also, I was a write-in candidate for the 2020 presidential election. But I would like to, discuss this from a perspective of being Director of Emergency Services, previous Director of Emergency Services and Homeland Security. And first and foremost, how can anybody justify having the Senate and the House in one building performing whatever task and not having it secure? In this day and age of terrorism, international, domestic, and also with all the scenarios of what was transpiring with Donald Trump telling his supporters to come to Washington, D.C. to disrupt the count. So how could you not even be prepared for an event like this? That is the real question. And the other aspect of this is the dichotomy and the duality in policing in America.
All right.
They have a set of rules for us as Black Americans, and they have another set of rules for how they handle situations and scenarios when it comes to their fellow constituents.
All right, let's deal with the first aspect, because a lot of people are asking these questions, particularly when one saw, in fact, the first instance is, who is responsible for securing Capitol Hill, particularly when two important houses, the Senate and Congress, are together like that? Whose job is it?
Well, it is the Capitol Police. But when you have a situation that was prevalent yesterday, that should have been a coordinated joint effort between all agencies. It's called multi-agency coordination. And that comes with just fundamental planning. This is fundamental to Homeland Security. You will automatically have FBI, CIA, Metro Police, Capitol Police. They say that Donald Trump is responsible for calling up the National Guard, but you would actually use your mutual aid agreements with neighboring states, Virginia and Maryland, to be on standby just in case something happened, especially if you have over tens of thousands of people descending on Washington, D.C. It wasn't like it was a surprise. And so who allowed for such lax security, which end up jeopardizing every member of the House and the Senate and the Vice President of the United States of America? There has to be a serious investigation into whoever is the chief of police, the mayor of the city, everybody, because everybody is supposed to be involved in these type of planning for these type of events, whether or not there's going to be protesters or not. The securing of the Capitol building is fundamental.
And then the second aspect is how the police handled them. We saw police officers having selfies taken with these people, and this was in the middle of an insurrection. Walk us through that.
Well, as I said, there is a duality. And it's a reality, the duality of policing in America. And as you may have seen, when Black Lives Matter was in Washington, D.C., they have a photograph of the police and the guards fully geared uh, in fatigue and ready to go to war against Black Lives Matter. And as you saw when they decided to tear gas and shoot rubber bullets at the protesters during the Black Lives Matter movement, it was unbelievable. Yet, you have tens of thousands of people descending on the Capitol in a hostile manner. This is called domestic terrorism. And we trained for this in Homeland Security. Although it was interesting listening to a federal prosecutor from the Department of Justice saying that there are actually no federal laws against domestic terrorism. And I'm like saying, are you kidding me? There's no law against domestic terrorism. I have to research that. But the fact that they were able to go through the Capitol, breach the Capitol, march through the Capitol. I don't know if you saw the police officer running, the African-American police officer running up the stairs from the mob.
Yes.
I'm quite sure that if the roles were switched, if it was a white officer and Black people were running up the stairs, I'm quite sure he would have pulled his weapon and discharged it. But it's just interesting how the police respond to that group versus how it responds to us. And this is a conversation and a reality that America is going to finally, once and for all, have to deal with. Because when you look at it, you even have to question the rate of incarceration of African Americans in the prison systems because of duality of policing in this country.
In the lead up to this, there was a lot of planning and organizing that was happening on social media, online, for everyone to see. That's how it is that they were able to assemble at these rallies and then march to Capitol Hill. We have to ask the question, where was intelligence in sifting through all of this, recognizing that there's a major threat at a venue that the Vice President of the United States will be at and the most senior politicians in the country?
Exactly. There are going to have to be a lot of questions asked, and there are going to be a lot of questions that are going to have to be answered. I would presume that there are going to be a lot of resignations, not just as you currently seeing people are like finally getting the courage to resign out of the Trump administration after 3 years, 11 months, and 2 weeks. I mean, this is not a surprise to anybody. There is no justification for the lack of security of the Capitol building, especially given the fact that you had a mob there challenging and contesting the validity of this 2020 election. That's a failure on every level of government and every level, CIA, FBI, Metro Police, Capitol Police, and all contingency planning that needs to be in place for when you have any event like this with or without protesters. All right. Unbelievable.
So there's a lot
But then again, look who's the head of who's the director of Homeland Security, but yet they can find alleged federal officers and send them in vast numbers to Portland to deal with the insurrection, and I use that word facetiously, that was taking place in Portland because of Black Lives Matter and because we're protesting peacefully against the injustices that continue in this country against people of color.
All right. People are talking about impeachment, which perhaps given the timeline may not be viable. But talk us through this 25th Amendment. What is it and what's the likelihood?
The 25th Amendment gives the vice president the authority to remove the president if he's seen as unfit for office. The reality of it, or the probability of it, is probably very slim because of the timeline, and that would probably start a vast counter reaction from this alt-right, white supremacist, extremist group of individuals, groups of several thousand individuals, and it may even bring it to the point where it might not even be safe to be in the streets of America if you're a person of color, if they were to actually remove Trump from office at this point in time. But yeah, he should be removed. He should have been impeached a long time ago. They have sat here for over nearly 4 years and watched the shredding of our Constitution, the shredding of our democracy, and they were planning on the continual narrative, false as it is, of an election being stolen. And stop the steal is their mantra, where if anybody was guilty of election fraud, it was Donald Trump and his inspector general, who he put in charge of the whole postal system, who tried to sabotage the postal system and the mail-in vote.
So let's talk a little bit about the future now. We saw unprecedented before former defense secretaries issue a letter. We've seen former presidents, including Republican President George Bush, deplored what he saw yesterday. And we're seeing now more and more Republican senators who were longtime supporters of George Bush turning on him. What does this mean for the Republican Party going forward? Because after January 20, the Republican Party will still be there, even if Donald Trump may be out of the White House.
Well, like I often say, this is, and several others are starting to actually say it, that this is not the Republican Party that they signed up for. This party does not by any means resemble the party of Lincoln. In this party, the passage, if this party had to pass the Emancipation Proclamation, let me tell you something, we'll still be on the plantations. So this is not the party that I signed up for in 2011. I felt that there was a tremendous opportunity and there was tremendous hope for the future of this party. And as an African American, I really felt that I could bring my experiences from corporate, from Homeland Security, and really begin to share and bridge the gap between Black America and white America. And I have several friends who were in the Tea Party from where I am up in New York, and I learned tremendous amount of knowledge and information from them about the political landscape of America, which showed me that is possible to work together and be united. And that was part of my slogan, Unite and Secure America, because a divided America cannot and will not ever be a secure America. So if we continue down this path of divisiveness and fascism and supremacy, we are looking at the demise of our democracy. And so what will happen to the Republican Party? Look, Donald Trump has amassed a fortune post-election. And I guarantee you that his 75 million supporters, 75 million Americans, mostly white, voted for Donald Trump. That is a phenomenal number. That is the second most, except for that he lost by 7 million to Joe Biden. But it was still a phenomenal amount of votes, a phenomenal amount of people who hinge on his very words. And I guarantee you that he will continue to control the Republican Party. And anybody, well, you know what? This insurrection, it was insurrection, but it was domestic terrorism. It was just domestic terrorism. And so you are finally starting to see people kind of say, wait a minute, I don't know that I want to be associated with this. Finally, they should not have wanted to been associated with this years ago. But I guess they say better late than never. But if you would have heard Lindsey Graham in the chamber after the insurrection that took place, it was like he had an encounter on the road of Damascus. They got scared straight last night. I'm telling you. I couldn't even believe listening to Mitch McConnell. He sounded like he made sense. He sounded rational. He sounded that he was like a real, true, patriotic American for the first time in 12 years. It's amazing because, see, they never thought that they would be in jeopardy by these extremists who they have been placating and playing the drum beat to throughout this whole entire time during the Trump administration. But this is not over. The Proud Boys are still here. These extremist groups are still here. And we have a long road ahead of us in America. Not to even mention that we still the worst country as far as dealing with the pandemic in the world. We have the most infections, the most deaths than any country in the world. We still haven't dealt with that yet. All and right. The implications.
Okay, so still quite a lot on the table. Peter Sherrill, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you. All right, so that was Peter Sherrill, who's someone who was involved in Homeland Security, who understands the shortcomings of the security that was put on for yesterday's confirmation procedures, and he says it was woeful. We'll have more for you on The Globe.